So, hello and welcome to everyone who's tuned in to today's session. This is week 4 from Psychological Horizons, and the panel discussion for today is Wellness at Work with EAP Counselors. I am your event coordinator for today. My name is Sanjana Rao. I am a counseling psychologist. I have a private practice, and I also work as an assistant supervisor at Mindful Dating in UK. For those of you all who've tuned in to this session for the first time, Psychological Horizons is an initiative to give back. I'm sure a lot of psychology graduates upon graduation wonder, okay, like I'm ready, but like what next? You know, I have my theoretical knowledge in place, I have my degree in place, my certificate in place, but what does it look like in terms of a career? And so that is where Montfort Alumni Association curated this 17-week program. We're on week 4 today, where we're meeting different professionals from the field of psychology to sort of talk you all through what their journey has looked like. And in fact, I think with the field of psychology, sky is the limit. And our panelists today are here to talk to us about how they've sort of ventured into EAP counseling and what it looks like for them. So, without further ado, I'd love to introduce our fantastic panel today. I'd like to start off with our moderator, Sneha Menon. She's a counseling psychologist and an EAP counselor at Resilience Works. She's practicing counseling psychology and is an EAP counselor. And she holds 3 gold medals in her master's in counseling psychology as well as her bachelor's. She's also currently the president of Montfort Alumni Associations. Thank you, Sneha, for being here today and coordinating this entire program. I'd like to also introduce our next panelist, Shanu Ben Chowdhury. She's a counseling psychologist and is associated with One-to-One Help. She has a postgraduate in counseling psychology with a specialization in family and couple therapy from Montfort College. If and just a heads up, our panelists here today are all alumni from Montfort. So and Chanu has her degree from Montfort College. And so along with her association with One-to-One Help, she's also managed to work with managers and offered consultations with regards to employees, several issues that they face at the workplace, and how their performance is affected, and workplace relationships, team effectiveness, and a lot more other concerns that pertaining to workplace. She has also worked with cases of grief and bereavement. She also has done seminars in CISDs, on sites in various companies like Microsoft, Cummins, TCS, Cognizant, and ITC. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be here with us, Shanu. Up
My
next,
pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Up next, I'd like to introduce Muthu Kumar. He is an in-house EAP counselor. He graduated from Madras School of Social Work, Chennai, with BSc in psychology. He has worked as a teacher in an inclusive school for 3 years. He received his master's in counseling psychology from Sampurna Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore in 2020. Since then, he has worked with people from different walks of life, and in his tenure of working as an EAP counselor, he has adopted an action oriented approach to mental health management by working systemically and collaboratively with clients in an effort to enable them and empower them. Thank you for being here with us today, Muthu Kumar. Up next, we have Divya Jayakumar. She is currently a clinical team lead at Workplace Options. She has an MSc in counseling psychology. She started her career off as an EAP counselor at Workplace Options before transitioning into the role as a clinical team lead at Workplace Options. And Workplace Options is the world's largest privately owned and independent provider of integrated employee well-being solutions. She has been with the company for 5 years now, and she currently resides in Toronto and enjoys exploring outdoors during the warm months with her dog. Thank you for being here with us today, Divya. Thank you for your time. And up next, I'd like to introduce Pratna Josephine. She is a consultant and a coach. She holds a master's degree in counseling psychology. She worked for an EAP service provider as an in house counselor at Google for 2 years. She also has a private practice and is currently working as a consultant and a coach at a firm in Bangalore, through whom she provides individual sessions and facilitates trainings psychoeducational sessions for varied client organizations worldwide. She's currently striving towards working effectively in cross cultural capacity, mental health awareness, and creating inclusive, safe, and healthy workspaces. Thank you so much for joining us today, Pratna. Right. So this is our fantastic panel for today. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over this platform to Sneha Menon, our moderator, to take this session forward.
Thank you, Sanjana. I hope I'm audible. Okay, great. So, firstly, thank you all. I'm really glad that we're here today and we're getting an opportunity to discuss a very important aspect in psychology which many people aren't aware of, employee assistance program. And I can say that from personal experience that it has been a lovely journey in EAP. I've also heard a lot from many people, as well as I'm sure today they're going to hear from you. So, how about we begin by just introducing what is this concept of EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and maybe one after the other, y'all could share and tell us a little about what are the services that an EAP provides so that our viewers have an understanding about what to expect or what this area is about, right? So, Divya or Prarthana, would any of y'all like to go first and, begin?
Sure. So EAP, with I can speak for workplace options. Um, I would say it's an integrated support. We look at providing emotional, physical, practical needs. So it's not just about the emotional support. It's also sort of integrating what other concerns are you having in life that may influence or may impact your emotional well-being. So we sort of take all of that into consideration, and we give the resources and we give the support to the clients. What that can look like is it is a confidential service. They do have employees have access to free counseling support or free work-life resources. What that can also mean is that the employee's family can get that support. So it's a benefit that the company buys, and then any employee of that company gets access to that benefit. Um, the key thing with the EAP is that we do provide short-term counseling sessions, and that's how it can be different. But within the scope of the EAP, it's, I would say, very holistic because we consider the employee or the human being as sort of having all of these different needs and that we're able to cater to.
Okay. So, on one side, there is an element of being short term, and on the other side, it seems to be holistic. So, Prarthana, would you like to add in and pitch in a little bit more about how it's, from your perspective and experience?
Sure. Yes, so I'm just adding on to what Divya mentioned. So, yes, I think it's basically from the organization's point of view, at least, they want to ensure that their employees feel like they're taken care of. So, I think that's the primary motive. And in turn, if it can improve their productivity as well. So, that's what is in their mind when they tie up with any EAP service for that matter. And I think and then that's what the EAP service provider also promises, right? And like Divya mentioned, the primary factor that we speak about to them is the confidentiality factor, because that for me is the major difference, I would say. Because when you consult with anybody privately, I think we do a lot of research and you feel a little more safe. You probably go in with your soft reference of people you know. Whereas when your employer is providing the service, sort of, there's a lot of hesitation that comes in there. And I think that's one of the, I think, major difference for me. Talking about my firm that I work with, it's called Human Dynamic. So we mostly work with APAC. And there, I think for us, we also provide legal and financial advisory services. So that's the additional, other than the emotional part, this is also something that we offer. Yeah.
That's very interesting. So, something that our viewers can notice, it's sort of like a package. It's not solely about just one particular service, but like we started the conversation with, it's having multiple aspects, right? So, Over and above these multiple aspects, like maybe counseling or short term therapy, Shanu and Muthu Kumar, could both of y'all give us a little bit of highlight of what are the other things that, probably our students could prep for before they, venture into this?
Okay, so I just wanted to add a little bit because Divya and Pratna, they beautifully explained uh, the EAP in itself, what it means and what it means for the organization when they usually tie up with an EAP service provider. So apart from, see, actually the focus is that they want overall well-being for their employees, right? So overall means both physical and mental well-being. So for mental well-being, obviously psychological counseling, like they mentioned, it is available. Okay, psychological counseling, again, different modes: e-counseling, telecounseling, video, face-to-face, right? Chat, even chat counseling is available. So when it comes to again, Pratna mentioned that finance and legal counseling. At one-to-one help also we have finance and legal. Apart from that, wellness counseling, where dietitian and nutritionists are available to give wellness advice, right? Nutritional advice. So yeah, so I will come to the second, the question that you asked. So I don't know. I think that if you are planning to join AP, first is that uh, you have to be. Uh, I think that you should be okay with the ethical bit, right? You should be. I think the extra skill, extra training or EAP skills that you would want, that it is. You should have a growth oriented mindset when you come here. Okay, so since counseling in itself is an evolving field, right? So EAP counselors must maintain a growth oriented mindset and remain open to continued education, right? Or opportunities or reading or trying to update themselves. So second, I think that if you have a working knowledge of an extra regional language, that would help in an Indian setting. Okay, so that is obviously if you can just like sharpen your language skills, that would help. Apart from that, documentation plays a very important role in EAP setting. Okay, so maybe taking a short-term course or and again, if it is EAP setting, it is a corporate world where a little bit of Excel knowledge, little bit of data analysis knowledge, that would help if you're really looking to grow in an EAP setting. Yeah.
Very interesting. I think Shanu's pointed out some technical bits that somewhere in the process of all of us doing it in daily life, we tend to miss it off. True. Yes, Muthukumar, could you share a little bit more about, from your experience, your take on it?
Sure. Like how others explained, it is a package, right? So each and every aspect of the employee's mental health and physical health is taken care of in the EAP setting, and other support that is provided by the organization. So one thing that I realized when I joined the EAP, I joined very recently. One thing that I realized is we need to prepare ourselves to take different modes of counseling session. It's not just going to be a direct in-person session. We need to take chat counseling, we need to take email, and all the other things are also there. So that is also something that we need to prepare ourselves, like how Shano explained. We need to know a little bit of Excel and all the other things, and each EAP works differently. They will have different softwares to use for different things, so you need to be really mindful about all those things. And confidentiality plays a major role here. So even when we take sessions, we need to make sure that we do not share anything with anybody else. So basically, those aspects are really important in EAP, and how others explained, we need to keep updating ourselves with what's happening in our organization, in others' organization. Because when sometimes client calls in and say that this is happening in my organization, if I do not have any information about it, I'm going to be blank. So little bit of information about what's happening in the others' organization, or very basic knowledge, would also help in this aspect.
Very interesting. Okay, staying up to date. All right.
Yeah.
I noticed some of y'all have mentioned about e-counseling and chat counseling around twice or thrice. Um, any one of you who would like to, take and tell us what is this e-counseling and what is chat counseling? Because in mainstream courses, we don't generally get to, I'd say, venture into these two areas. So, what would you say is e-counseling? What generally happens in that? Or chat counseling?
I think in the last 2 years, we've really seen a boom in this. with us not having access to any face-to-face contact. E-counseling can be anything that's not face-to-face counseling. So it can be telephone counseling, it can be video counseling, it can be chat, it can be email, it can be text, anything that is not sort of just in-person support. And I think with the pandemic happening, we really sort of, I don't know, but I can't speak for anyone else, but I can say that we really sort of saw the need for most immediate support that is not in-person support. It's easily accessible, if you have, and if you're not comfortable with in-person support, this is something that, if someone is shy, if someone doesn't know how to express themselves with words, writing down can be very therapeutic. So it has its benefits, but also, for people that it doesn't work, it may not be a choice for them. But yeah, e-counseling is definitely something that is for the future.
I think they just shared about the perspective of how clients could benefit through e-counseling, which is I like she mentioned. I think it really boomed these last couple of years. So I just want to add a perspective about how it could be for the therapists, and especially for people who want to pursue EAP as a profession. Because when I started with my service provider during the COVID, when pandemic just kicked off, at that point, I started off with e-counseling even before the pandemic situation arose, and I was initially taken aback because to adapt with that, I'm like, I'm not able to, there's no non-verbal cues. All my theory is like going off the roof, and what do I do? And so I'm quite intuitive, so that I consider that as my strength, and I'm like, I've lost a lot of my opportunities for that. So it did take some time and for me to adapt, but I realized at the end of my first really good session or successful session that either way, whichever mode that is, the client is feeling supported or helped after it, and that's what really matters. And as being in the service sector, I think for us to adapt to whichever mode, because we need to end of the day we need to give them that sort of support. So I think that adaptation came in a little. I had the advantage slightly earlier before the pandemic, and I think most EAP counselors who've been practicing for some time, I think they would have the advantage. But people who started during this pandemic or who are going to start, I think they would have found that slightly difficult, or that would have been something. But now that we know this is the new normal, I think it will be good to start adapting to that, and also the whole theoretical aspect also, right, from our traditional ways of counseling, or how what sort of orientation that we usually use, sort of adapting to the EAP sort of channel, because we might not have the luxury of having multiple sessions with them. Like Divya initially mentioned, the whole mode is sort of different, and it depends on the package that the client is purchasing. So, I just make it a little more clear for people who might not be aware. It might be just 3 sessions for some clients. It might be just 5 sessions. So once we take the intake, we also need to be mindful about how many sessions can I plan with this client, and that completely changes how I'm going to be in my first session or my second session. Everything sort of changes, and we didn't, probably at least for me, speaking for me, I didn't know this earlier. So I sort of found my way through it. But now that we're having this conversation, I hope it's useful for people who want to pursue this and keep that in mind.
Yeah, so at one-to-one help, surprisingly, it is the second preferred mode of counseling. Uh, so first, always being tele. So second, and I'll tell you why it is preferred usually by employees or clients. So one can stay anonymous, right? It's very convenient. Again, the client can always go back and read the responses, right? Again and again, just go back and read the responses and take help, right? The help is there available. And obviously, flexibility, can write whenever they are free, right? They can finish whenever they want to. So I think this is why this is actually clients have started adapting and preferring, they prefer this mode. So we are at this platform, so I would really I would want that universities and colleges, they should start this, right? Again, teaching e-counseling and chat counseling at college level. I think it's become really important. Yeah, so
Yeah, one more point to add here is I graduated during the pandemic, the first lockdown. So that time we got the opportunity to learn the modes of counseling. So when I started working, I realized that chat counseling is something a lot of people prefer, and I was very curious why they choose this. And then when I asked, they said that I do not have the privacy to talk over call or take a video session or go for an in-person session because for lockdown, my parents are sitting next to me, so I can't talk. I can chat. So that was a easiest mode for them to chat, as well as like Sham said, they can go back and read, and then they can use it again as well if they do not have the opportunity to come back. And so this kind of gives them the privacy, as well as it's easy for them to access it. So,
Okay, so from what I gather, there's privacy, there's anonymity, there's a sense of space that you're getting. Also, for people who can't express or don't want to talk much to others or see face to face, writing and expressing is another good mode. Something interesting from a therapist point of view that Prarthana mentioned is traditionally speaking, I know times are changing, but ideally, when you do not have somebody sitting in front of you and you're not able to grasp like what is happening, right? Or let's say, it's maybe emergency situations. Sorry about that. Emergency situations. It's not quite. Easy to immediately like tackle such a situation, right? So in those situations when you see like an email of sorts, maybe like it's either high risk or a little more on the severe end, you see emails or chats, what's your general first course of action in order to help the person, and what would be maybe one word of advice or suggestion that you'd like to give our audience?
I'll go first. So I think each organization have their own protocol when it comes to a high risk case. So when we join as a EAP counselor, it's important, and during the training session itself we learn the protocol, and also it depends on each organization how they want this protocol to be. Some organizations want us to call them directly and inform that this person is at risk to go. Some organization might want the family to inform. Sometimes the client itself have a emergency contact person to with whom we can have a conversation with. So each organization has their own way, and it is important for us to know all these things during.
Yeah, I think I agree with Kumar, and I think he said it greatly. Every organization possibly has their own way of crisis management and risk management. But in that scenario that you mentioned, I think the first thing would be, how do we keep the employee safe? How do we keep this person safe, right? How can we reach out to them immediately? Is that something that is possible? Have they given their contact number? Do they know, do we know where they are? So in terms of any crisis management, I think the first reaction would be, are you going to be safe, and how can I get you to be safe?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah,
Sham.
so I definitely agree with both Divya and Muthukumar. So, different organizations, different protocols, and we have to adhere to the protocols, like I mentioned. But yeah, when we actually get an email or an e-counseling, which seems critical, so usually the first thing is that we would definitely reach out to the employee. Again, if the employee or the client is not okay talking, so what we usually do is, or most of the EAP service providers, they would do is that maybe send the SRA questions, right? The suicide risk assessment questions, okay, over an email for them to answer, so that they again, they are at a comfortable space. They are when they are at that mindset, just they can just reply. And again, like Mitu mentioned, that again there would be protocols, right? If we assess the risk to be high, obviously we will be either reaching out to a family member for support or the company. So that is again, but to all the freshers out there, believe me, if you join an EAP service provider, and you all your live ECs will be supervised for few weeks, months, right? So nothing to worry there, right? Yeah. So a lot of hand holding happens for, because again, like I mentioned, a lot of documentation and protocols, right? So yeah, good training is provided.
So I think supervision definitely. What about this element of time bound? because when it comes to each of these modes, right, there will have to be, since you all are mentioning about documentation bit of it, that is something will probably have to be done like on time or within like a time frame. So maybe this time management skill is also something that our viewers could take back from, the session, and prioritizing it also. Like, I think maybe if you're getting like requests of chat at different points of time based on maybe the severity, so I'm guessing some sort of hierarchy for prioritizing it will also be in place. Great. So I think we've covered the bit of what's the difference between our traditional way of looking at it as well as an EAP perspective. And moving on to personal experience. For each one of the panelists over here, what has been your biggest challenge in an EAP? Your
Oh
biggest
yeah. So,
challenge and learning. Yes,
sorry, challenge it.
learning.
Learning. I think it's mostly the same. I think, especially when we speak about any professional growth thing, challenge. If it's a challenge, we're born to learn from it. So I think for me, it was the shift in my orientation itself. So I was really inclined towards understanding the family dynamic, or the psychodynamic, also like something that I connected to and all of that. But yeah, all of that's not sort of possible in with your EAP service. So I definitely do explore that in my private practice, because I can do that, and I sort of get the opportunity to brief that with my clients. So what I did was, like I think Shanu did mention earlier, the biggest skill I would say that a person who joining EAP would require is to be adaptable, because that's what it takes. Because initially I remember being rigid even myself, like in terms of my mindset, in terms of, oh, this is what I learned, or this is what this is how I work with my clients. That slowly has to sort of change. And I took up, what I did was I took up learning ACT. So I sort of use two modalities, that is, so whenever I need, when I know it's a short term help that my client needs, I use SFBT or ACT there. So my orientation sort of changes. And otherwise, when I know I have the time, and I really like to explore about the person's childhood, family history, and I that's what comes naturally to me. But then I know I have this shift now, and I'm really enjoying it, because I feel like I can provide what the client needs. At the same time, we also are bound to the organization that we work with. So if that's how much they're entitled to, so that's how we need to approach it also. So yeah, I think that was a challenge for me, and I feel like I'm comfortable with that switch now to choose. It sometimes is an urge that you feel there are other revenues of the client that you can see through, or you want to sort of help, because you do understand with your experience. But at the same time, you have a certain limitation. So we sort of focus on what is the client's, for me at least, what my clients come in with. What is my client's, the urgency, or what is the concern they want to work with at the earliest. So I sort of try to narrow it down to that, rather than trying to bring to bring out all that we know or all that we are good at. So I think that adaptability is also something, yeah, I would recommend for others as well who are joining. Yeah.
I think if I were to say, when I was a fresher and when I first joined Workplace Options, it happened pretty soon after graduating from Montfort. The amount of information can at the beginning be quite overwhelming. But once you start the job, I think there's a lot of exposure, especially for me. It was a lot of global clients. It was just that understanding of being culturally sensitive. That took a little bit of a learning curve, I would say. Crisis management, but the amount of support that you get, with just that, understanding, learning what the process is, learning sort of, even though we're all different, globally, but still the same when it comes to being human. Um, and sort of having that curiosity through the process, I think, was extremely important for me, because like Pratana said, adaptability is very, very important, but also having that sort of curious, going to the job with curiosity. What is it that is going to bring for me? So it can be challenging in the beginning, but once you've really settled into it, once you have that supervision, once you have that training, the amount of exposure that you get is far it's much faster than I would imagine if it is traditional therapy. I don't want to say traditional. I would say, just sort of your private practice.
So yeah, again, I think that for me, the challenge is very similar to Pratna. So when I
Privacy, very nice.
finished my post graduation, so obviously theoretical orientation, very psychodynamic in nature, and yeah, that was again so very limited sessions in EAP, and we don't do psychotherapy there, so that was the biggest challenge. But yeah, what I tried doing was that, or I still do, is that maybe initially one or two sessions just try to understand the problem. There I think when psychodynamic approach helps, right, where the issue is stemming from, so just understanding that bit, and then maybe using an eclectic approach to deal with the concern or issue. Yeah, so again, a bit of advice that obviously SFBT, knowing more about SFBT, so a short-term course in SFBT or narrative therapy or ACT for that matter, that would really help, even if prior to joining or even looking out. So I think the final year students, final semester students, they would have the time to think about it, right? Yeah.
For me, I think the training session that I went through was quite intense because this is something that they didn't teach me in class. And then I go through this training session and then it was too much for me. And then one thing that I was really surprised is there are so many clients who wants to take sessions. In private practice, I know that there are very few people, or like 100 people maybe in a year you can meet. But then when you start with an EAP, you have so many clients who want to take sessions with you. That is something that was very interesting and something mind blowing for me. And the challenges that I face is, let's say I have a session right now, which is a high risk, and then I have a session after an hour or after half an hour, and then I have to like suddenly stop here and then move on to the next client. And the documentation is, okay, initially it was quite bad where I have to like upload all the session notes that the session notes I have taken, and then I have to put it in the software and then upload it every time I have to do this thing. That was quite challenging. Learning wise, it's a good experience where I get to use parts of each and everything. And then the supervision was timely supervision. And whenever we need somebody, there's somebody always there to support us, even our colleagues or our supervisors or manager. There's always somebody there in the flow to help us out. So that was something that was really helpful during the very difficult times. So I think EAP is a good place.
Really interesting and such nice personal experiences. Um, Also, from the workload that I hear all four of y'all say, that means y'all will have to keep your emotional fuel also running. If you're having, let's say, in a day you're working for 6, 7, or 8 hours, um, you're taking 5 sessions, 6 sessions a day, and given the fact that pandemic there's so much uncertainty like happening, it's not easy for y'all also as therapists and counselors. So how do y'all manage during the day and after the day in order to refuel yourself so that you're available, you're physically present the next day again for your employees and clients?
I would say it really depends on the organization as well. Like about how flexible they are in terms of your scheduling, or in terms of again the employees, that is even the therapist mental health, right? Because some organizations do provide therapy service for us, and they do sponsor that as well for us. So it really depends on that, because I mean, so far for me it's not been very difficult, I would say, because I've always had flexibility to schedule my sessions, and so I ensure I space that out. So I also take the extra effort to ensure, because we know at least the first call we might not know, right? But once the first intake is done, we sort of have an idea how we can space out. So if I already know I'm going to have a heavy day, or if I'm going to have a client where it's like a critical case, so I sort of ensure I take a break after that, or I schedule my next session after that. I take that space, and yeah, so I think it's really your responsibility on how to manage it, and it depends on the flexibility your organization provides as well. For me, so far it's been good, In terms of how I refuel, I feel these are things that you also start learning after college, because like MK mentioned even earlier, there are a lot of things that there are deficits in terms of what you learn at college, and especially what you start, especially the initial years, I feel. So sort of reading is something that I try to take up every day in the morning at least. It's not constant, there are breaks sometimes, but I just take at least 15 minutes to read something related to mental health, or therapy, or anything, just 15 minutes in the morning to kickstart my day. Because otherwise you just open your mail, or you just start with responding to things, you sort of get carried away with it. So it sometimes it feels you're not doing enough to uh, you know I would say the what to say. I would say to inform yourself, maybe. So I sort of felt that like I'm just doing what my organization is asking me to do. I'm not doing anything extra. That sort of feeling catches up with you, because you have clients packed, and your schedule is packed for the day. So that's something that I do, and I do ensure I take breaks in between. And once I'm done with the session, one thing that I do, it might sound small, but what I do is I do not stay in the same room, or I do not stay in that same, at least even the space. So once the restroom, but I have to step out, right? Even if there's no reason, I just step out, because it's sort of for me, it makes me feel physically I'm cutting myself off that space, and that's very important for me. I cannot be in the same surrounding for a long time. So that's something I do. I talk to people at home, or if there's anything else that I can do, and then I come back and connect with work. So I always have that buffer of at least 20 minutes to half an hour between one session to any other work that I have. Like I ensure I do that.
I want to say, especially to the freshers and people who are just really joining, to be very intentional with the self-care. Going into the job, you really want to you want it to be good, you want to put in all of your effort. That can sometimes just mean that you're doing a lot more, and then at some point, you can experience burnout, or it can just become too much. I would say self-care, to be very quite intentional with it, and that means sort of really just putting in a plan that will work for you. If you're working 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, really just saying, okay, I'm going to go into work, do the job, and then at the end of the 9 hours, I'm disconnecting from that. What that looks like for you, either just sort of having, taking a walk, or just sort of having people that you're talking to after work. Very important to have that in place. During the debriefing with colleagues, I would imagine for me was really huge to just say, I had this really difficult conversation today. I don't know sort of how to manage that. What do you think? Do you have any suggestions for me? And just also just talking about it, I'm frustrated with this, or I didn't, this is what came up and I feel like this. So really, I would imagine your colleagues become a really, really important factor within that space. And the fact that you have people who are within the organization experiencing similar things, so you don't end up sort of burning out quickly.
Yeah, so I think almost all the points are covered. So just that I would recommend taking clinical supervision outside EAP also, peer supervision, like Divya said, personal therapy, right? Make sure that you have your own personal therapist, and take time to go for your personal therapy. On a day-to-day basis, again, I have this rule: 20 minutes under the sky, no matter what. Because we don't know, it is quite uncertain still if will we be working in a hybrid mode or work from home for how long, not sure. So yeah, initial 2-3 months when work from home started, I think that we all I can talk about myself, I was just lost, right? So um, uh, so I think that I make it a point that I get ready, right? Get ready in the morning, right, up for all the video sessions, and I take regular breaks. And like I said, that 20 minutes under the sky every day, no matter what. So yeah, that's
Yeah. So for me, I feel like there's a lot of autonomy when it comes to private practice, but then when you work for an organization, the autonomy becomes very less. I wouldn't say very less, but then yeah, the autonomy reduces. So we need to understand what happens in the organization, like Divya mentioned. Peer supervision or the peer group, your colleagues are your support system, the first support system. I can turn towards my colleague, I can talk to them about something. So that is something that helps. And also I make sure that I do not talk about psychology all the time. Like all my colleagues are psychologists, all my friends are psychologists, so it becomes too much for me to just to talk about it. So I make sure that I bring in random conversation so that takes me off from what I'm doing that moment. So that kind of helps. And personal therapy and regular supervision. Whenever I need something, I can easily walk into my supervisor's room and then tell them this is what is happening to me. So that kind of support, if you get from your supervision, if your organization provides that, it's amazing.
So there is a culture that is starting from the top, from what I hear you all say, starting from support to the sense of accountability, responsibility, and regularity that all of you seem to be having in common over here. That's really nice. And supervision, personal therapy, also peer supervision, very, very important. I know that, when we leave college, we sort of many a times underestimate the importance of it. But having that objective feedback also very important, because many a time we may have so many things that's going on, we may have, like, maybe either emotions or personal experiences also that's clouding our judgment. So having that person who you can go to in order to help the client also makes a huge difference. And also you get a chance to share a little bit about what you're going through or feeling about that particular case. So another question that just came up very spontaneously is that, let's say y'all as counselors are not able to handle some particular case. In an EAP model, what happens in situations like that? Um, for whatsoever reason, you what happens to that client? Let's say either you feel you're over identifying with that client or something on those lines. What generally happens? Like, is it like fixed, or is there any room for, any kind of flexibility? What generally happens? If you all could just give us a brief pitch on it.
So, if I understood you correctly, Sneha, you want to know, for example, if the counselor is not able to, if a counselor finds the session like client difficult, that's what
Yeah.
your question was. What happens then?
Yeah.
Or
Like, is
think
there a space for that particular client to be referred to another counselor, or does
yes.
that not happen at all? Because, you're allotted to this one counselor and you have to stick with that. So, how
No,
does that?
yeah. So I think that I'll be able to answer that. So obviously, in EAP setting, because there are limited number of sessions, so obviously the employees would come back for returning sessions and would want sessions with their same therapist. But yeah, if something like this happens, many a times transference, counter transference, right? Or the counselor feels that okay, maybe it's a clinical issue, not in my purview to help. So yeah, so after discussing with the supervisor or the TLs, it can be transferred to other therapists, right? And the intake team usually or the TL would call the employee and make them understand why the case is being transferred, right? And obviously, we are transferring them to an expert or who has a person who has specialized in that kind of issue. So yeah, I think usually it is a possibility we can do that.
Just adding to what Shannon said, it's always, I think, in our profession, it's important to be comfortable while providing therapy, to be very aware of what our own limitations, and what we are comfortable and what we're not comfortable with. And I think in any in our profession, sort of saying this trauma triggered me. I've possibly experienced it. This is difficult for me. I'm hearing about it. This is too much. Of course, that's not something that you're going to be forced to sit through or forced to sort of support. That I don't know that if that ever happens. And of course, there's a room for it to say, this is not something if it makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to do it.
I think it's like in any other avenue where therapists work. I think we do not take up any clients if we are not comfortable with it, especially for our own personal reasons as well. Or it could come with expertise also, saying I'm not experienced in a particular avenue. I think that's very flexible, I think, in any avenue. With the EAP specifically, yes. So we internally discuss if anybody else can take it, at least speaking for myself, if another counselor can take it up. And even in that situation, if nobody else is available or nobody else wants to take up that particular concern, then we also tie up with affiliates. So we always have a list of affiliates we work with. So we reach out to the affiliate and we assign the client to our affiliate and they take it up. So we pay the affiliate as per the session and the number of sessions they take up with the clients. So yeah.
Yeah, we do exactly like how Pratna said. If we can do it internally, we do it. If not, we transfer them to another.
Great. So I think we've had an amazing discussion in terms of what an EAP is and what clients, as well as a lot of our viewers, can look forward to in terms of learning. Is there anything else about an EAP that y'all would like to, probably pitch in one or two words about? And then we could probably move on to, if there are any questions, we can hand it over to Sanjana, and mutually y'all can decide and take that.
So, if I could go, I would say for a therapist, considering the different avenues that we do have in India, it's quite limited. I would say EAP is a great space to grow. It's definitely a great space to grow because with all the other avenues, at some point you might feel like, what more can I do? With EAP, the growth is not just vertical; it could also be horizontal. So it's not just like you're a therapist today and then you're going to be a supervisor. It's not just vertical. So you can take up other roles in sort of helping, like you can sort of contribute to the L&D team in creating good modules for the client's needs. Suppose the client says they have a need of some psychoeducational need, and you can pitch in there. And if they want to bring up a new process, a wellness process for the organization itself, you could take up roles like that. So I feel this opens up a lot of opportunities within the EAP service itself. So not just as a counselor, we can do multiple pitching for multiple other aspects. Build a wellness system for the organization or a structure. So I feel I that's what really excites me in my job, because otherwise I would just be doing one session after the other. It can feel monotonous sometimes. So I feel like getting to do this extra bit makes keeps me going. And yeah, even most part of my work also involves me to do a lot of that, create modules, and also provide that sort of training for clients. So yeah, that I would say that. And another thing I would say to keep in mind is that we might come with this preconceived notion that, considering these are all organizations and huge organizations sometimes, that they are all going to be aware about mental health. They're going to be really open about the service. It's not true. You are still going to find people who are quite resistant. You might, like MK said first, you could be surprised. There are many people who might come forward for therapy, yes. There might be people even within the organization, that is client organization, not the service provider. You would see that they are pretty resistant or not really aware about mental health. They might be having a lot of questions in terms of what is the ROI, how do I measure that this employee